Planning Commission to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Charles Beckman,
Present.
Ellen Smith,
Present.
Ben Forster,
Present.
Emily Pratt.
Present.
Thank you. The minutes of the petition 24 PC 75 text amendment of April 1, 2024 have been submitted. Any additions or corrections?
I actually did not send those minutes to you. If you want to table those until next month,
Okay.
I can get those to you
All right,
guys
we'll
for
table.
review.
We'll table that till next month. Under old business, we have petition 24 PC 75, petitioner Lee County Zoning Office filed a petition for text amendment, which the petitioner desires to, 1, amend chapter 5 residential district, article B, single family residential district, section 6, restrictions under title 10, zoning regulations of the Lee County Code of Ordinances to allow chickens as an accessory use with restrictions as reflected in Exhibit A, which is attached here to and made a part hereof. And 2, amend Chapter 9, use and bulk regulations, Section 2, accessory uses under Title 10, zoning regulations in the Lee County Code of Ordinances to allow for chicken, in quotes, with restrictions in the table as reflected in Exhibit B, which is attached here to and made a part hereof. The zoning officer will speak to that issue, both of those.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for coming. I do want to thank you guys for attending last month. If you did so, the public's input was really crucial in this conversation on chickens. Based on the testimony that was taken last month at the public hearing, there seems to be quite a divide between those who would like to see the chickens in residential zones versus those who would like them to stay in the ag zone. At this time, the county has asked me to withdraw my petition, and we are not going to move forward with adding this as a special use or as an accessory use at this time. If this issue does come back around, we will again repeat the same public hearing process. It will be put out for the public to have comment. We'll do this all over again. The county has asked me to do some more research on the matter to see if there's some way we can bridge that gap between the two sides. But at this time, the petition has been withdrawn.
Thank you. Under new business, the accessory dwelling units for discussion only. I believe we have the proposed tiny home ordinance. Is that the one we're looking at now? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Comment from the zoning office?
I'm gonna let Laura Mangrum, she's the deputy zoning administrator, also our floodplain manager for the county, and she has kind of taken the lead on the issue of accessory dwelling unit and tiny homes. So I don't know if you guys want to have this discussion in tandem because they are very similar.
Okay.
So I don't know, you guys don't know me well yet, but I've been in real estate in this area for 19 years. I come at this from that background. There's housing shortage, as we all know. So what this would do is this would help to open some more doors for housing possibilities. The accessory dwelling unit would be a secondary dwelling, would not have its own address. They're also called granny pods, things like that, which would allow for that second dwelling on the property. It's a good thing for multi-generational housing, keeping, families together. You can keep your parents with you, things like that, with autonomy. And then the tiny house would be a primary residence. So we're going to be, when we do adopt building codes, we'll be doing the ICC codes, and they top out at 400 square feet for a home. So I had suggested 200 to 400 square feet. That keeps it in that tiny home range, and then it would seamlessly transition into the ICC codes once they're adopted. For the tiny homes, there's the regulations there. They'd be treated, they could, as similar to if a mobile home becomes a primary home where you can bring it in on a trailer, but then it has to be attached permanently. No wheels, no axles, anything like that. Once it's sited. Not really sure what all you guys, was my first time. What you guys want me to say? It's kind of I will say Gallus knows it's kind of a passion of mine. I've been talking about it for a long time. Pretty much since I started, about how important I think this is for this area, to open it up. And by having them, you also see in there, or that I would hope that we'd be able to take the minimum lot size down to 1 acre for tiny homes, which would allow density as well. So we wouldn't have to give up as much farmland to be able to have more housing.
So it's a lot of information. And so what are we looking for from you guys? You guys are the kind of the planners for the county. So, is this a use that we feel is appropriate for Lee County? Does it comply with our comprehensive plan? If it does, what districts would it work in? We have the 4 different districts. Some allow housing, some don't. Then we go down to like bulk regulations. So, what kind of requirements would you need in order to build that house? Accessory uses. If we're going to allow a tiny home as a principal use or a principal dwelling, what kind of accessory uses do we want to see with that use? So we're coming to you guys kind of to start brainstorming on how to put together an ordinance that would be appropriate for Lee County. Then we would do the same thing, take that to public hearing and pass it on to the county board if we get something formulated. So tonight I have printed out for you the rules and definitions. These are mainly the definitions from our Lee County Code. I have printed off the chart that shows principal uses, the chart that shows accessory uses, and the chart that shows bulk regulations. So that you can kind of get an idea of what different uses we're seeing in the different districts, what we currently allow, and so on. So I guess, what are your thoughts? Do we feel that this is something that we could make work in Lee County? What would be the pros and cons?
First off, I have a question on the use charts. You've got PRS.
Yes.
I don't see,
Sorry.
and I might be overlooking it.
Nope.
What those mean?
So I cut and paste from the internet, so I apologize. P stands for principal use. S stands for special use. R stands for restricted use. And T stands for temporary use.
So on a restricted use, how is that different than a special use?
So if there is an R in the chart by a use, you have to go into the code and look at what they have set forth under the restrictions. So in the I3, which is a heavy industrial zone, some uses are restricted uses, specifically adult entertainment.
Sure.
So if you look on the chart, you'll see that that has an R. So then I would flip to the I3 section of the code and look for the title that says restrictions, and then it would spell out specific rules that would be required to allow that as a restricted use.
Okay.
Now, there are some that have the R, and when you flip into the chart, there is nothing provided in the code. So it's not perfect, but this is what was adopted. I know everything in C3, if it has an R, there are no restrictions listed under C3 at this time. So that's one of them.
My understanding of the tiny homes portion is that this is going to be a new structure or add-on structure to an existing residence.
This would be the principal residence. So if you think of it, the tiny home is the principal house, the ADU is the secondary house. So if you wanted to do a tiny home, it would be the only home on that lot. You'd have a garage, possibly a building, but it would be the only actual home on the garage. And the really important difference is that with the ADU, it does not get an address. So it's not a separate home, it's just an accessory to the principal home. So you wouldn't have like 2301 and a half. It would just be, everybody has to just sort their mail together. It would not have its own address.
So a tiny home, when we look at the uses, a principal use is the main use of the property. The accessory use is something secondary to the principal use. So you can't have an accessory use without first establishing the principal use. So a tiny home would be the principal use. It would be the main use of the property, essentially. They could then build accessory buildings such as a garage or whatever we determine to be an appropriate accessory use for that structure. The accessory dwelling unit is accessory. So therefore, there would have to be an established home on the property. This structure would be separate and unattached from the main home. It would be its own separate space, essentially.
But that doesn't subdivide or change the lot description.
Correct.
If I have a tiny home and I put up an accessory, do I have to get permission for the
Yes.
accessory?
Yes.
And would I be allowed to conduct a business in that accessory?
And that is what if the tiny home is the primary principal use and they have a business on the property, that would be in conflict with the code, assuming it's a residential district, even an ag district. If it is a home occupation where it's some type of business that's not visible, essentially, you don't have foot traffic, you don't have a sign. It's something, if you do some kind of woodworking skill or something out of your garage, that falls under home occupation. So that would be allowed. But to conduct a commercial type business in a residential district would not be allowed.
And the tiny home would have to comply with normal code requirements? Or
Yes.
electric, plumbing?
Yep, it's written in there. They provide the basic requirements for shelter, heating, cooking, water, and sanitary sewer utilities. Yep.
So didn't you mention 1 acre? Is 1 acre large enough if it's outside the city to do septic?
Yes, so the health department's, it's actually the health department that requires the minimum 1 acre. If they can be, so there's always exceptions, but we did talk to them to ask them what they would say, and they did say they wanted to keep it at a minimum of 1 acre for these lots. The difference is that in Ag 1 and R1, it is 2 acre lot requirements. So on here would be in the bulk regulations to allow 1 acre lots only for tiny homes within those 2 districts, only because they sit at 2 acre minimums.
Is everyone following where we're finding that information about lot sizes?
Yeah.
Okay, on the bulk regulation sheet. So currently, residences are allowed in the Ag 1, R1, R2, R3, R4, C1, C2, and C3. R3 and R4, let me correct that. R4 is multifamily, so that's going to be your apartments. So we typically would not expect to find a tiny home or an accessory dwelling unit in an R4. R3 is a mixed residential use. This is typically where we find mobile homes, but it's also for single-family homes or duplex-style homes. It's kind of a mixed use. That's probably going to be the most appropriate place to have a tiny home. However, there is very limited R3 zoned areas in the county. And those are typically our mobile home parks. So I don't think we want to pin it down to strictly that district. R2 is your single family living. Tiny home would fit that category. R1 is your rural residential. Typically, these are going to be bigger lots because they are going to be outside of, most municipal areas. And then Ag 1, we keep it at 2 acres because, the goal is to preserve as much farmland in the county, to discourage residential development in those areas. But in this day and age where the cost of building a home is astronomical, this might be an alternative to somebody who would like to buy 5 acres and have their little tiny cabin home and enjoy their space, versus putting a lot of money into a home. So I do think that we should allow them in the ag zone. I think we should allow them in the R2. I think they should be allowed in the R1. That's my thoughts. What do you guys think?
So,
Go ahead.
so they'd still have to comply with the regular or usual LISA rules?
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with letting them into the ag zone, like you said, for preserving farm. If our goal is to preserve farmland, why are we letting
So they would still have to pass the LISA.
Sure.
So that's going to be the thing. Right now, if it's the same person, they buy 5 acres of land, and whether they're going to develop it with a 1,400 square foot home or a 300 square foot home, it's still seen as development.
Mhm.
The tiny home would actually take up less space. So that one's kind of tricky because if we're going to let them build a 1,400 square foot home, if they pass LISA, why wouldn't we let them build the 300 square foot home?
I would think it would probably be resale value
Okay.
after the fact,
That was going to be my
And I
question.
understand there's different motivations for
Mhm.
a tiny home. Some people want the simplicity. Others want to meet their basic needs as cheap as possible.
Right.
And so meeting their basic needs as cheap as possible doesn't sound like they're necessarily going to be able to take care of the other things that would be necessary on maintaining 5 acres. I mean, that's just my feeling on the subject.
So, go ahead.
I would respectfully disagree. I think that if you look and if you research a little bit, you'll see that there's actually a very large movement into minimalist housing. It's a trend that's growing and growing across the nation.
Oh, I'm
for-
well aware of it.
Yeah, people don't want these big homes anymore. For a lot of them, they really don't. They really do want to just have their small house with their land, just enjoy their lives like that. It's a good thing for people that travel a lot. It's a very easy home to close up. The utilities would be, you're talking about heating 300 square feet. So it's a very efficient way for people to live. I couldn't, because I saw what you're allowed to take to your kitchen. That's just not enough for me. But there are people that really do want to live that minimalist. And in theory, you could have people with all their costs that could like I said, in theory, depending on how big or little they want their home, they could do this for $225,000, which to have a new home at that price right now, or even a used home at that price right now is very challenging. So people could get in there. And again, we would require that they be permanently attached, that they know that they not be mobile once they're in place.
What I can do is reach out to Brenda Merriman. We work with her. She's with Lee County Soil and Water Conservation District. She's who we partner with when we do our LISA reviews of property.
Mhm.
I can reach out to her and get her opinion and bring that back to you guys next month to get her thoughts on that.
If a developer were to subscribe to the tiny home concept and brought a plat of survey, what size would those lots have to be?
Minimum of 1 acre.
There's also the possibility that, I mean, it would take some work on the subdivisions part, but we have a lot of, I don't know if you've noticed, we have a lot of dead subdivisions in Lee County. They started, and just because the cost has gotten to be so expensive, people are no longer building. This could, in theory, open the door for these subdivisions to reclassify certain parts and allow tiny homes in, therefore reviving land that's already been set aside that people at this time cannot afford to build on. So it's just one more possible. It's just another possibility. All this is just really opening the door and just giving people another option for housing with that.
Would this supersede any covenants in place in the subdivision as far as minimum square footage?
No, it would be up to the subdivision to change their covenants to allow tiny homes if they so choose.
Sure.
And covenants are tricky. County can't enforce them. So really,
Right.
if somebody came in and said, I want to build this home, I would say, okay, under county law says you can, but you need to check your covenants because you could end up in a lawsuit. So that's kind of how we treat those, but that is not the intent. That would be up to the developer to amend his covenants if he wanted to see that type of development in his subdivision. I think the goal, and not necessarily a goal, but one of the ideas is a tiny home community essentially. It would kind of be like the 2.0 version of a trailer park, essentially, a mobile home park. It's a cheaper form of living. If we created an area where they could come in and develop a whole bunch, that might be ideal for certain, income ranges. And that's what we're trying to figure out, though, is do we want to see this development in the county? And if so, where? And we're just kind of bouncing ideas at this point. Trying to see what you guys think. And then once we start to get a few ideas, we can start putting things together a little bit more concrete. So I don't know how much we want to get into this tonight. But that's kind of what our thoughts are.
How many requests have you had like within the last year and calls about
For
tiny homes or
accessory dwelling units, quite a few actually.
What we've actually had is a couple of cases where we have families with adult children who are disabled that want their own space, but need to be close to somebody that can care for them. So we've actually had 2 of those within the last 3 months. And it's really hard because it's a very hard situation for these people to be in, and they're coming in looking for a remedy. If we had the ADU, that would be an easy solution for some of these people. Unfortunately, it's just too hard to be able to buy 2 acres of land or to find if you already live out in the country, it's hard to find a home close to you. So There are some of those challenges. And I guess that's kind of where we're kind of seeing the ADU being beneficial, for those types of situations, for the aging parents, for the wayward child that ends up back at home for a couple of years. It is an option that allows people to have that accessory use on their property, but keeps it at a minimal. Doesn't let them necessarily turn it into a rental unit with its own separate address. I mean, it is a possibility. But if we do it right, we help restrict their ability to do that. So.
On either one of these proposed ordinances, if you consider the number of people in a residence or a dwelling. I mean, who's to say somebody doesn't make a 200 square foot home, keep the 5 children, and next thing you know, they have parents, they have grandparents and everything else stacked in there like cordwood.
Doesn't the health department have?
I don't know about the health
There's-
department.
I know that there are regulations as far as how many people can live per square feet. I just have to remember where it's at. I don't know if it's the health department. I know DCFS has it for sure, but I'd have
I
to
was gonna
find
say that would definitely be a,
as far as how many people can be in a house.
But as far as a DCFS thing, what if there are no children? What if, it's,
Well, it's the same thing that right now we don't have any regulations. If you had a 1,400 square foot house and had 20 people living in there, we don't have any regulations as far as how many people live in a residence right now. So I'm not sure how we would put that in and then how we would police it, how we would enforce it. I don't know. I would think that it would get very crowded very quickly in 400 square feet. I would think it would get pretty crowded pretty quick, but.
never thought about that before. And now you're got me
I mean,
thinking how bad that could get.
Right.
well, I mean,
But-
we have mandated confinement square footage for livestock. It's just a thought.
Should have it for people.
You gotta have a certain amount for your chicken. Or for your sow. So,
Unfortunately, the code doesn't allow me to regulate that.
okay.
So like you can see in the bulk regulation chart, that's kind of what tells me, but what people do inside their home, I don't get any say over that.
I can really only think of one that comes to mind as far as a dead subdivision. Where else are some of the dead subdivisions that you're seeing?
So my
Dina?
definition of a dead is just subdivisions where nobody's building. And that'd be a lot of the rural ones. It's been a while since Wildcat, since Shadow Ridge, since Coyote Pass. And I'm not saying this in a negative way in any way. It's just the truth of the situation because of their minimum square footage. I know for a fact Wildcat's like 1,700 square feet. I can't do this math in my head. I'm not smart enough. But my brother's a builder. Right now, the price per square foot fluctuates between 165 and 170 a square foot. So if you think about just 1,000 square foot house, you're looking at 165 to 70 for your very basic house. And then tack on another minimum 700 square feet. Most of these subdivisions also have rules as far as what you have to have on the outside. You have to have so much brick, you have to have so much this, so much that. They're very regulated as far as that goes. And it's just become an unaffordable thing. I hope anybody listening doesn't think I'm being mean to subdivisions. I'm just being factual. It's become very, very expensive to build. And like I said, the market fluctuates so wildly that it's hard for people to lock in their costs. So like I said, all this is, and it would really be up to them. We're not suggesting that they do it, but it does open a door for some of these places. The one out on Lenox, that one's been quiet for a while. Maybe I should say quiet instead of dead. That one's been very quiet for quite a while. That one out there had not had, new builds for a little while, stuff like that. So there's just it's just a possibility to use already existing zoning to possibly revive it. That would be up to the developer, that'd be up to the subdivision to decide if they want that. But again, it's just opening a door for one more possibility out there.
Okay.
So I know that you sent us a lot of stuff, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't read it all. But from your background, could you talk a little bit about where tiny homes are being built? What is their effect on real estate values and what is their effect on population in those
So
areas?
the good news about the tiny homes, because they need less space, is that you can actually have greater density. So if you had, let's say, 10 acres and you could do 2-acre lots with traditional sized homes, you're only getting 5 homes. But on that same 10 acres, if you can do 1-acre lots with tiny homes, now you're getting 10 homes. So you're not taking as much land out of play in order to get the same amount of housing. Tiny homes are somewhat new, but in areas where they are popular, it's really just going to depend. I mean, somebody might not want, it's the same, it's all subjective. Somebody that wants a tiny home will pay for the tiny home. Somebody that doesn't want it, they're not going to. So as in all real estate, it's all in the eye of the beholder. I don't like me personally, I don't like big houses. I don't want to clean them. So to me, having a big house is not attractive, but this person over here, they're going to love it. So again, real estate is all subjective, but in the areas where these are being built and they are being allowed, there is a definite market for it. People that are downsizing in this area, there's not a lot of places to downsize to. It's just it's a very challenging market right now. So again, like I said, so a person that has the big house, and not how deep you want me to go, but real estate is kind of like a game of leapfrog. So you have your starter home, your next home, your final home. As you move up the ladder with income, children, things like that, and then you walk back down the ladder with real estate. So the first person in the starter home can't move up until this person finds a home because this person's moving because this person's moving. And what we see a lot where we get stuck on is starter homes and final homes, the homes that people retire into. Those are the crucial pieces of real estate, and there's a very large lack of it. Somebody could retire into this home, somebody could start in this home, and that would just, like I said, just because one more option in the real estate leapfrog game.
And are there other communities close to us that allow tiny homes or not yet?
They do, because we're in the group for it. So there are areas they haven't really, they're still newer, but more and more communities are starting to look at it for the possibilities of housing. Thank you. Was it Rob? I don't think so. I'd have to look. I'll send another email.
More information.
Right.
So I have a question. So as far as the tiny home goes and allowing them in the Ag 1 district or the R1 district, you're proposing that we allow for a 1-acre lot for the minimum.
Yes.
What if I wanted to build a larger home? It's currently not permitted in those 2 zoning.
You mean a larger on the 1-acre?
Yeah.
The way that I have this written is it would only allow the Ag 1 and R1 to allow the 1-acre lot only for tiny homes. So you couldn't say, well, I want to build a 1,400 square foot home on this 1 acre. It would be restricted strictly to the tiny home use for those 2 areas, so that you won't have people building traditional size homes on smaller lots. Which it could be challenging on an acre anyway to get a large house with your well and septic placement, but
I live on one.
Huh?
I live on one.
Good. Glad it fit. So that's what I had put in here, is that it would take the 1 acre only for the tiny homes with this ordinance. Suggested, of course.
And that's just it. We're throwing out ideas. We're not the decision makers. You guys are steering committee.
Mhm.
And so far, I'm hearing a lot of hesitancy with the Ag 1 and the R1 district specifically. I'm also hearing some concerns though with the R2 related to subdivisions.
I have less concern with the subdivision and I can't remember if like Lost Nation is Ogle or Lee.
Half and half. It's partly part Ogle.
So, yeah, there's a bunch of lots out there and, it's a strange place,
Yes.
all for it out there. Yeah, I mean, I do struggle with, I would say special rules for Ag 1 and R1. Carving it out just to accommodate a small home.
So if we were to go that route, essentially you would see like you do currently in the bulk regs, ag 1, 2 acres R. That R would then direct you to the code where you would see special requirements set forth for the tiny home use, if that were to proceed. So just to let you know what that would look like.
I guess I have more of the issue of changing the lot size to accommodate.
Okay.
Where we're not I know there's plenty of other people that would love to live rural in a traditional size home. But, the barrier of the 2 acres is the barrier of the 2 acres.
Okay.
And, you're making a special exception based on a size of home. I guess I have another question is, what is the population change of Lee County historically over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years?
Not much.
And I look at Dixon, and Dixon's population really hasn't changed since I was a kid. I mean, it's fluctuated between 15,000 and 16,000 people. Also, our state is losing people. So, I mean, I understand the need for less expensive housing, but I also don't know if we need to encourage
So
an in-fad movement or I would say a fad.
okay.
Homesteading is a fad. Chickens have become popular. Minimalist lifestyle has become popular. 10 years from now, something else is going to be popular.
So what about allowing it in the R3 initially, which is a mixed use?
Mhm.
This is where you will see mobile homes, different, duplex. But typically this is going to be your mobile home parks. There's a significant area of R3 in the Nelson Township. But it would be a way to allow it in, and maybe try to see where it goes.
So we're not gonna let it in anywhere else.
Just, we're saying initially R3 to see. If you guys are thinking it's like a fad and maybe not going to catch on, R3 does open the door. It will allow it to be developed in certain areas. I don't know what mobile homes though. I don't know if mobile home parks would allow them to come in. We would have to talk to some of those to see, or if they have special regulations strictly to mobile homes. But that would be an idea, I guess, to still open that door, but to give us a better idea of how to gauge it as it develops.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see more data as to what, surrounding areas are doing and, more input as far as, weighing against where we are as a county and where we are as a state and population.
Well, and the population itself, I think probably is the same, but how about the ages of people? Because the number of kids in our schools have drastically dropped. Am I
Exactly.
right about that? So our population, the age of our population is different. And some of that could be due to the amount of affordable housing for a younger person starting out, or a younger family is somewhat non-existent.
I'd say there's
My-
plenty of, I mean, I wouldn't say there's plenty or a plethora, but I mean, there are affordable homes.
In Rock Falls.
Well,
And their
No, I
taxes
mean,
are
but-
ridiculous, but
But I mean, and in Dixon, I mean, I started out in 1,000 square foot slab house. You know?
Those 1,000 square foot slab houses right now are about 129.
and that's
I
the
understand.
thing. I mean, I'm currently looking at real estate and the houses that were, you know, 80, 90,000, $100,000 homes 5 years ago are now 140. So it is, we are seeing an increase in the cost of housing. There's very limited, you know, a house will come on the market and if it's worth buying, it's gone within days. So it is pretty limited right now.
But it's a cyclical market. It was also limited in 2006, 2007. And then you couldn't get people to buy homes in
We
08,
also have,
09.
we also have a lot of new businesses coming to the area, a lot of development that is happening. And again, everybody's going to need somewhere to go that wants to come into the area. And the problem too, right now that we're seeing with quote unquote affordable housing coming on the market is that most of it is unattainable for a lot of buyers because a lot of buyers in this area, the majority of buyers are going to have a government backed loan, FHA, rural development, VA, things like that. There are not a lot of cash and conventional buyers. They're out there, they're kind of unicorns, but most of them do have government backed loans. And a lot of these houses that are coming up in that affordable price range need too much work to qualify for those loans. So it shuts out a whole group of buyers. And there are also rental companies that are coming in and snatching these houses up as rentals before buyers even get a chance to look at them.
So I'm sorry. Please
No, go
finish your
ahead.
thought.
No, you're
I
fine.
did not mean to interrupt. Can you buy a tiny home with a rural development?
As I would have to double check on that, but I do believe so, because as long as it meets the minimum property standards, then yes. Square footage from what I've run into, as long as it's not a mobile home, then it should be fine, but I can double check into that.
Yeah, because I'd be interested because my
Right.
1,000 square foot slab house was a rural development.
Yeah, so you know,
So,
no appealing.
so I do
to
know, I do have some history with that.
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, I understand the need for affordable housing. It's just, how do we go about it the right way to where we're not left with an unusable mess later? As a county. With dilapidated properties. Or lack of people to live in them.
Fair enough.
I know the city has also discussed developing properties out towards the new development, the Folf's Farm. I forget the one behind it.
Mhm.
Yes.
Has there been a discussion with Dixon on this topic?
No,
Where's this?
I
Out by
haven't
the
talked to
pool.
Dixon. Have you talked to Dixon?
No, because our interests are, because we wouldn't have any control over Dixon's, we wouldn't have any input over Dixon's zoning, like they don't have any over ours, so I have not talked to them.
I don't know what size of the houses are, but of ours, put together the Washington.
That's my brother,
Project.
that's my brother.
Yeah.
Even those though are, because of building costs, those will be well over 200,000 for a basic home. Just because the cost of building is so much right now. I mean, they're
Those-
great
those
plug
are
for him, but they're,
Very small lots.
mm,
And
So how big are those? Sorry.
the house or the lots.
The houses he's building right now.
They're custom. The ones that he builds on spec are generally about 14 to 1,800 square feet. They can go as, I think that he can get them as small as 1,000, but you give 1,000 square foot slab house that you're gonna pay 165, 175 for minimum. And that's with just your absolute basic finishes, which are nice, don't get me wrong. But it's just, like I said, it's just, you don't get much anymore for your building
Mhm.
dollars. And this, like I said, this was only meant to just open a door of give people another option. If we're not telling people to build them or buy them, we're just opening a door to allow this for people.
So,
I don't hear anybody saying they're totally opposed,
Yeah, and I'm not.
No, it's an
totally
information.
opposed.
intriguing idea.
but I think we do need to make sure we know where this is going.
Okay.
And
I can send-
demographics that Emily was talking about lead me to believe that the accessory home may also be something that we really need to look at because
For
there are
sure.
a lot of older moms and dads out there.
Well, and it's a shame that
Son or daughter may
yeah.
decide they need a home with it.
Right. And it's a shame that multi-generational housing has fallen off so much because people want to retain their autonomy, but that's hard to do when you're sharing a bathroom and you're sharing a kitchen and things like that. So this does allow for that, like certain scenarios you could have where the kids move into the house and the parents move into the ADU or vice versa. So you're keeping the families together, but nobody's, stepping on each other along the way.
So I think Ben brought up a good point about if the tiny homes can be 1 acre, should we really be restricting that for larger homes?
Yeah.
so what I'm hearing, I guess, from this conversation is you guys would like more information. So I'm gonna reach out to Brenda Merriman, get her thoughts on, what she thinks these will do in the ag district, if she's for it, against it, and what her thoughts are. Laura's already talked to the health department. We'll look into see if any of the counties surrounding Lee County are currently doing this or have anything in the works. We'll get that information to you. We'll look into what type of loans can be used for the tiny homes. Is there anything else that you want us to look into?
Is there a possibility that we could move to a smaller size, but not quite down to 400, or would it make no difference? Does it have to be 400?
Right now, the code is minimum 800 for the way the code is written right now. To be classified as a tiny home, yes, then there are restrictions. Again, because once we adopt the ICC code, if we're going to call them tiny homes, they top out at 400 in that code. So it would be, I don't think it would be good to say, well, we'll let it go up to 500. And then when we adopt the codes, then we have to reduce it down to 400. So this was just forward thinking with the codes we're trying to adopt to go ahead and try to match up with what they already have for that.
And to back up just a little bit there, Lee County did apply for a grant that would assist the county in adopting building codes. We won't get the results of that until the end of this year, so we'd still be a couple of years out if we decide to move forward with that. So just so you know where we're coming from when we talk about that. Okay. So we'll do more research on tiny homes. Does that go for ADUs as well? Or do you want to treat that separate? What are your thoughts? Do you want us to start putting something together, I guess, on accessory dwelling units?
Well, I personally, I see it, if it's a special use, it's gonna be permitted in a special case with and go before the zoning board each time, correct?
That's if we make it a special use. So
And I do agree with it being a special use versus,
I do too, just because we can make it a condition that, once the person moves out, then the special use goes away or essentially. So
Sure.
it does give us a little bit more control with that use. We can also make conditions specific to the site. It might look different every time. So I do like that idea of the special use.
I agree.
I think with that, we can probably consider those separate,
Okay.
more efficient. Lumping them together.
But if it's a special use and it's a secondary home, how do we remove that special use? Do we also make them remove the home? Don't.
So, and that's what it would be on a case by case basis essentially. So if what we could say is, say there's a situation, they're building it for their aging mother. Things happen, they no longer need the house. We could have it established that once the mother vacated the residence, then the zoning goes away and they can use it as an accessory building, but not as a living space. Or we leave it, and as long as they comply with the conditions, they can continue to use it as living space. I mean, that's the beauty with the special use permits is we kind of
Okay.
have that,
There is some flexibility.
yes.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
do we have any problems with accessory dwelling units in Ag 1, R1, or R2?
I don't.
I would only, from the covenant standpoint of a subdivision.
Okay. R3 is the mixed use.
I don't think that's appropriate for them.
I don't either. If we're going to allow this size of a structure, I think it would be more appropriate to have the tiny home as a use in the R3 than an accessory dwelling unit in R3. That would open the doors to someone having a mobile home with a second home. It just gets very complicated. Probably won't work for the mobile home parks. R4, again, not appropriate. C1, C2, and C3, again, not appropriate. So we can focus on those 3 districts. And if you guys are okay, I can start putting together, what that would look like in a code form. Okay.
Anything else on those 2 items? Item C, shipping containers.
Okay, this is just going to be a brief, high-level overview of shipping containers. They're getting to be more and more in Lee County. Probably should be considering some regulations. I don't want to, currently they're used, I hear they're great. Airproof, waterproof, excellent for storage. So I'm not trying to ban them or anything of that nature. We're trying to figure out where's the best place for them. Do we need to limit the numbers, things of that nature? Currently in my code, I would have to consider a shipping container, some type of inventory or material storage that occurs outdoors. If you look at your accessory use chart, outdoor storage, it requires a special use in the ag district. Special use in the ag district and commercial C1, C2, C3, I1, I2, and I3. So as it stands right now, people that have shipping containers could technically be considered in violation of the code if they don't have a special use permit specific to having that container on their property. What I'm trying to do is figure out a way for people to legally keep these on their property, but we need to figure out how we're defining them as a county. My feeling is, and I've talked to a lot of people out, especially in the ag district, that they need these, they use them for the storage of their equipment and everything else. They're handy, they can come in onto the property. My thing is if you're going to use it for storage as you would an accessory building, then we should treat it as an accessory structure. It would require a building permit. It would be subject to tax, not saying the assessment office would tax it, that's up to them to determine that, but it would be subject to tax. It would be subject to the bulk regulations of the district, so people can't place them on property lines or just over the property line, and we're seeing a lot of that going on right now. The second thing is we're seeing more and more, I have a property where I'm watching the number of containers increase. What do? I'm kind of stuck here because I don't want to tell him to get rid of them. If he wants to have them on his property, that's fine. But when is enough too many? Now it is really turning into an inventory of shipping containers on the property. So I guess I'm looking for you guys to consider this maybe over the next month, see what your thoughts are. Ideally, I would like to see them remain in all districts except residential. Possibly R1, because those are bigger parcels. They tend to be more rural, but they typically still fall in a subdivision, so we do need to consider that. So all I want to do is just kind of give you a brief overview of what I'm dealing with in the office. Right now, I am telling people that they need a permit for them, a building permit, because that's how I'm interpreting the code at this time. But I do think that we should probably consider, and I'm not talking about any great long list of regulations. I'm just something so that we can make sure that an ag site doesn't turn into an industrial site because they filled it up with shipping containers and who knows what's going on there now. So that's that. That's all I have on that. Any thoughts?
There are a lot of them around.
There are.
Getting to be more all the time.
Well, I mean, you've traveled the world, you've been places, I'm assuming you've been in lots of places. Most of the world lives out of these things. As far as storing things, I mean, that's why they are popular.
And that's why I'm not really trying to restrict them. I struggle with the residential district because they typically do not have a residential character. However, I have seen some that have been painted that blend into the background. You don't hardly notice them in a residential district. So that's the thing. I'm looking for you guys for direction on where to head with this. I shared my thoughts, but I'm going to hand it over to you guys to consider, and maybe we can meet again next month and have more of an in-depth discussion.
Could a container be used as an accessory dwelling?
So I did get an email, and that's kind of part of the discussion. Is I had a company out of the suburbs call or email me about, do you allow shipping container homes? And I have to do a little more research. I think our code has exterior construction requirements, so I don't think they would be allowed based on what our code currently has. But that's the other question. Do we want to see these being used for residential purposes? I'm more concerned about the way they're being used right now in Lee County, but it is something to consider that we might start seeing that as well.
As far as them being used in Lee County, would it be more palatable if you had an exterior? I mean, I understand you drive by somebody's property and you have 15 different colors with 15 different languages. As far as an appearance part of the code.
And that's the thing. I don't know what's appropriate. I just know what my code allows for right now. I guess ideally, I didn't consider any painting requirements if they were allowed in like the ag, commercial or industrial zones. I would consider maybe a limitation, like so many per square acre, and maybe capping it, you know, so you have a 40-acre parcel, you could have one for every square acre you have, up to 5 or something like that. So that, because that's the thing, we're seeing a lot of the use with the farmers. You know, they take them out to certain properties and they leave them there. So I really don't want to restrict what the farmers are doing, but I do want to try to keep Lee County looking a little bit better than what we have going on right now.
So what about if they are in on the same property for, let's say, over 6 months? We allow a temporary permit for up to 6 months or a certain period of time. But if it becomes permanent, then they are going to need to permit that as if it was a building.
So
And as
current,
they are, you know, like they're using it for storage as they are.
yes. So we do have a temporary use permit in our code that allows a temporary use up to 90 days. After 90 days, then it's kind of left up to the zoning administrator, but it's not to extend past 180 days. So, and that's kind of where I'm at with people, you know, well, the container, it's not attached to the ground, therefore it's not a permanent structure. My code doesn't say it has to be attached to the ground. It just says placed on the property. So I lost my train of thought.
State statute.
Well, neither is am I right? A large garden shed? Wouldn't that be very
Yes,
similar situation?
yes,
Right?
yes.
Okay.
The state statute, the way that it's written, states that it is considered permanent, no matter how it is placed on the property. Because we were checking into tax things with it, and they
Yes.
sent an assessment, sent us the state statute that does not say that it has to be attached in any certain way to be considered a permanent structure on the property.
So currently what I am
Right.
telling people is that if it is going to remain on your property longer than 90 days, you need a building permit for that structure. Because that's basically what you are using it for, is a structure. If they have plans to remove it, or it's, you know, because some people bring them in for construction purposes, you know, so it might be a 6-month job. They leave it, they have it there
Right.
for the work and it goes. So that would require a temporary use permit. But if it's going to stay on the property, then it would require a building permit.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I'm handling it right now. Any guidance is appreciated though, so.
I think that's fair. They're using it for the same thing.
Okay.
Talking out of turn.
No, you're part of this
Yeah.
committee too.
I want my friends to be with me.
Want your friends to be able to use containers too.
So to wrap this up, since it's very high level, if you have any thoughts over the next month, please email me. We can get into it a little bit more in depth next month, or we can actually, maybe we'll focus on the ADUs and deal with that when we're done with that too. I don't want to bog us all down. So if you can just think about that for the time being, we'll get into that a little bit deeper in the future. But that's how I'm going to handle it for now until we change regulations if we do.
Anything else on that discussion? Parcel number 180807102002.
All right, so you have a map in front of you of a parcel. This parcel has 4 homes on it. In Lee County, you can only have one home in the ag district per parcel. This is a grandfathering situation. So these homes were in existence when the latest rendition of the Lee County Code, zoning code, was adopted in 2005. What our code does is, and you'll see this in most codes, especially when there's a major change in the rules, they have a section for grandfathering or special exceptions, variations, non-conforming. So this, by changing the code at whatever time they change the code, this property is now considered a non-conforming use because of the number of homes. The owner of the property would like to do some addition to a garage that he has on the property and add on to one of the homes on the property. With the grandfathering and special exceptions code, typically what it does is it requires the homeowner to only be able to maintain and repair what is existing on the property. If they want to make any major changes, such as add on, build a new building, they have to bring the whole property into compliance before they would be able to do so. However, this code, the code that we have for Lee County, does allow the use to continue. And in the case of this one, what I'm finding is, so on 10-10C-8 on the last page, exempted building structures or uses. Letter C, any single-family dwelling which became non-conforming on the effective date hereof and is non-conforming only as to the total area, front, side, rear, yard requirements may be remodeled, extended, structurally altered, if in the opinion of the zoning administrator, such alteration will not adversely affect the health, safety, value, or general welfare of adjoining or neighboring lots. So previous zoning administrators did allow additional development on the property under that paragraph. The last zoning administrator did not allow anything beyond repairs or maintenance. My concern with this property is that at some point, somebody is going to have to deal with the non-conforming issue. Whether they want to sell off one of the homes or, you know, build on like they're trying to do. So I guess I need a little direction from this board as to, from a planning perspective, what should we be doing with this property? I could let them go ahead and build on. You know, it wouldn't be a major change. It allows them to continue using their property. Or I could require that they come into compliance before we allow any more development. For this property, that would require the subdivision ordinance. They would have to have lots less than the allowable in the ag district. I'm not sure if there's shared wells or things of that nature that would need to be addressed, but essentially they would need to apply for a subdivision. They don't feel that they should have to. They feel that the county did them wrong by changing its code and not allowing them to be permanently grandfathered in to do whatever they want with the property. That unfortunately is not how codes work. They're designed to eventually get all of the properties to come into compliance with the latest code, or you have to live with what you have at the time of the adoption. That's kind of the incentive. So I guess I'm looking for direction from this board do you feel we are at a point where that we need to, the county needs to be requiring a subdivision? Or is the county appropriate for allowing him to continue using his property as they have been?
Can you pull this up on the GIS screen?
Can you pull up the county GIS?
I think I know where it's at. I'm just
Oh, I
trying to
do.
confirm.
I'm pretty sure I know where it is too.
Very west end of town?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
okay.
Coming in on Rock Island Black.
Yeah.
Oh, no, like I
Yeah.
said, I just want to confirm, but I want to see
Yeah,
the
oh,
bigger picture.
See if we can get a bigger.
So those lot sizes, if they were separated, how big would those be?
That's, they would have to work with, and I don't know. It would be small because these homes are close together.
That's what it looks like.
Surveyor, looking at things to, it is rather onerous. No, we don't really want to put a lot of burden on owners. However, we have to, in this situation,
Zoning map, if you would, please.
it's not gonna get any better until we require that. So that's, I'm not sure if we're at that point or not. And I'm just looking for a little direction for that one.
So this person currently is looking to add on.
Yes, to a home and to a garage.
Okay. What type of room in the home?
Additional living space, that's all they said.
Okay.
I did provide you with a copy of the letter that he provided to my office as to essentially his argument for why he should be allowed to continue using the property as it is without doing the subdivision.
Can we
Go ahead
summarize
and
it?
enter in that one. Yep.
Do you have like a rough guesstimate of how much it would cost him to make it a subdivision?
I don't, but I'm actually, subdivision, we haven't had one in the county here for several years. I have been approached about someone wanting to create a commercial one. So I'm currently going through the subdivision code, trying to figure out how that process works. But there's cost, I mean, you have to work with an architect or a surveyor. There's cost for the preliminary plat, the final plat, the petition fee. If there's gonna have to be roads built, and in this case, I don't think there would be. But there's a lot to the process.
Okay, so that's the property there. What about the properties to the, I guess it would be the northeast? There,
The neighbors,
okay, yeah, I'm just trying to determine, are they all neighbors or are they individual residences all on the property?
So on these, you can see the numbers.
Okay,
They each have a house number.
okay,
So these are the individual houses. That's a garage. That's a garage.
but these are all on the same property that you're talking about.
All one property.
Okay,
So that's where the violation comes in.
they only have one residence per parcel in the ag district.
okay,
So I don't know when these homes were built. I don't know what ordinance they were under when they were built. Don't know if they're permitted. Our building permit records only go back to 1984.
So I can check the property cards, but
so how is the water and sewer serviced on all four of these properties?
that I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's in his letter that he provided, but that is something that if we required them to subdivide, the health department would have to come up with how they can do that. Because there isn't a lot of space for, 1 acre per house, like he said, or like the health department.
So they like the 1 acre that allows them to come to the well and septic and the
Mhm.
field and all of that. So I'm not sure, what the health. If it went.
Where city limits at?
Can I zoom out? So the gray areas. So this is kind of a funky little area here where we got some city mixed in with the county. It's kind of mishmash. No clear line.
Would it be in the county's interest in having the city expand a little?
Does the city want it?
Good luck with that.
I don't think that has been discussed, and I don't think the city of Dixon wants our west end. So it hasn't gone anywhere. But I know that has been talked about before. Is expanding that.
They'd have the same problems if they tried to get in the city. City would
Mhm,
right,
require a
right.
Separate dwelling or city water. 4 times.
I'm
Well,
curious
but-
why this is
but
even Ag one.
The city would be better equipped to service it with sewer
Oh,
versus the
absolutely.
situation that it's got
Absolutely.
now. I mean, it's not far to run sewer and water there.
Correct.
True.
And it could possibly be their only option
Mm-hmm.
if they were.
So one person owns all 4 houses?
Yes, my understanding is though, it's 4 family members, they all live, it's one family, they all have their separate houses. These aren't. Well,
What's the
So-
square footage? Are they a tiny?
not quite.
Can we make them apartments, turn it into an R4? Silly question. It just makes sense on the chart.
I happen to know that a certain someone, I'm not going to say by name, is trying to convince that detached apartments should be a thing. So I don't know if that would help or not.
Well, it actually,
That's what I used to call my 1,000 square foot slab home.
Mhm.
It was a freestanding apartment.
Yeah.
well, Emily, that is actually an interesting point that I can look into.
Because they're not
They're not farming it.
looking at separating the parcel. That's not their goal, right?
They do not want to subdivide. They want this to remain as one parcel.
Would R4 work?
That's, I will look into the R3, which is the mixed use, and the R4,
Oh, yep.
to see if that would give them any options. If they're able to rezone to that, then that would bring them compliant. So I will look into that.
Well done.
Well, and also would it make sense for the parcel next to them that is in AG1 that would be sandwiched in between? And maybe that person is fine. It is a
They're not
bigger
farming
lot.
it either.
What?
They're not farming it either.
No, they're not. They are on a bigger lot though. That one, those 2 make more sense
Yes.
to me, but
And that's the thing. I mean, I wouldn't,
Just grandfather their chickens and you're good.
I would not want to have to force the neighbor into some type of
And we-
rezoning.
and we wouldn't have to,
Right.
but could we give them the option?
Yes.
And would that make sense? I'm just.
Ideally,
out
it
there.
would be for them to go to an R2, and putting an R3 or an R4 out there would be spot zoning, which is typically not desirable. But with this parcel, it really limits further expansion on that type of district, and I'm not sure it's not appropriate for that area anyway. The Cummings Apartments are right down the road.
Mhm.
There is multifamily housing in the area, so even if we were to see additional development of multifamily in that area, it wouldn't necessarily be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of what's currently existing. So it would be something the county could consider. Typically, they say no to spot zoning, but in certain situations where we can prove that it is needed and that it's not going to cause an adverse effect or upset what is currently going on in the area, then it might be considered.
Off the top of your head, how many parcels like this do we have in Lee County?
Not many. I would say maybe 10. And I'm saying that because I'm sure there's some out there that I don't know of. I can't think of another parcel that has 4 homes on it. We do have a few parcels where I've seen 2 homes. Back in the day, there would be 2 farm residents on the property. We still have some of that going on. We do have a few situations where people have built homes to replace their existing home, but then didn't tear down the existing home. And so now they have 2 homes on their property. So there are about a handful of situations like that. And I'm sure there's about a handful that I'm not aware of. So not too often. And typically what does happen with these is if they are wanting to do some type of development on the property, they are forced into the subdivision. And I shouldn't say forced, it is their option, but it is typically their only option. Any more thoughts? Well, that concludes what I have for this evening. I'm going to continue to look into this property. I would like to meet next month if you guys are available. I've been in the administrator position now for a couple of months, and I'm trying to figure out how to make everything work. And I really would like to see more use of this board. I think that we have stuff that is appropriate to be going through this board. So if you guys don't mind, I would like to see you all next month if possible.
Fine with me. Anything else? Motion to adjourn.
So